Hello, this is Richard Kang, and today we'll delve into the development of the World War One. So, from my point of view, there are 8 steps in the World War One, and we will go through each and one of them in a really careful manner. So, the beginning, the trench warfare, the Ottoman joins and stagnation of the war, and the USA joins, and the Russian Revolution, and the Central Power surrenders, and there's the end. So the beginning of the World War One. So assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. I'm not good at pronouncing German, so I'm just calling it a day. So there's a so the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the rightful heir of Austro-Hungarian Empire, and he visited Serbia for uh, to look around his lands. And in Serbia, a man shot him, and he was dead on the spot with his wife. And so, because of this rightful heir did, and there hasn't been any heirs in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire declared war on Serbia. I mean, they didn't really declare it first, so they sent them a notice that it basically saying you done messed up, and they they wanted to repay, and the Serbians said nah, and because of that they had this declaration of war on them. So the Serbian kingdom was ruled by a king, as the name indicates, and the king was secretly supporting this uh, organization called the Black Hand, and they are basically far right far right nationalists group in the thing, and they thought the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was worth dying for Serbia, and another guy, he was really young, and he shot him dead on the neck, and that's why the war happened. So because Serbia was part of the Russian Empire, part of this pan-Slavic nationalism thing, the Russians and the Serbians had this. They were allies, and because Austro-Hungarians declared war on Serbia, uh, the Russians were obligated to protect Serbia, and there has been general mobilization order of Russia in there. And because Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire were on the same ally, the Germany declared war on Russia. And they had this. So before World War One, the World War thing, they had this plan called Schlieffen Plan. Again, I'm not perfect at German, so bear with me. So their plan was to conquer Belgium and other. So they have to take a really big detour, and they wanted to attack France, and their goal was to reach Paris. And because Belgium was an ally of the UK, the UK joined, and the French didn't really like this plan, so they declared a war on Germany too. And this plan was quite based on the Franco-Russian War at the time, because they thought getting more troops moved faster means they can win in the war. And that's what the Germans or the French HQ thought. So so there has been some battle at the frontiers. So the Battle of Lorraine, and the Ardennes offensive has been really decisive victory of the Germany. So they strike really fast, and they went through the forest. So they didn't really thought the German force uh will mobilize in that way. and the Germany was really victorious at the start of the war, and the Battle of Tannenberg. So there has been some disputes with the Russians so they fought with Russians at the same time, but because of the Russians invading Germany due to the war, they were really close up to Eastern Prussia, which is like a main part of the German military. So the German military was ran by Junkers. They are like novels, but they are based on the lands, not their titles or things like that. And most of their manners, I mean, they were novels and they had this weird long name like Otto von Bismarck. Seriously, so they had this really mana things in the Eastern Prussia at the time. So, and the German HQ didn't really like Russians invading their manners, and you don't really like Russians coming into your house, do you? So they kind of moved forces from the Western Front, and they kind of lessened the pressure on the Western Front. So, uh, the French and the English thing has been must have been conquered really easily if the Germany didn't really pull out the pressure on the Western Front, and because of that, the first Battle of Marne has started, and at the at this Battle of Marne, the Anglo-French alliance was a thing, and they tried to fight back, and the Germans tried to really fight at the time, but there is something called a termination of the offensive. So if you go too far onto the enemy land, then you lack your ability to resume the offensive itself, and there has been some stagnations on the front line because the Anglo-French army has built on defense lines, and they had this failure of they had this failure on the German side. So the Germans were really afraid of the double front, but they now have it in there. And this is political satire uh from the era, and it is this German Emperor William II being spanked by by the French general, and this is a French satire, so you can guess it. And by the way, the William II had this weird fetish thing. Later on, after he died, there has been some rumors about him being bisexual or him being pervert. I wouldn't really this I wouldn't really say that he was a pervert, but there has been some scandals around him. So if you're interested, search it. It is quite fun. So this trench warfare thing. So the main theme of the World War I, enlisted in the Western Front, was a trench warfare. So what you do is if you're shooting above the ground like a normal army, then you get shot like because you're standing. But the idea of the trench was that you dig a hole and you sit in there, you stand in there and you shoot, and because of the ground covering most of you, you don't get shot. Brilliant, isn't it? And if you dig a trench deep enough, then you the field guns shells will also be nullified because of the grounds they're covering. So they really had this idea before. I mean, even this sort of trench thing has been lasted around like 1,000 years, but they didn't really thought of it as a meaningful strategy. And in American Civil War, the trench warfare has been really shown up because they had this projectile weapon called the gun. Yeah. So there has been some major trench warfare going on, and not the major, but there has been some going on in the American Civil War, but the European military HQ didn't really saw it as a thing. They just thought it was a American thing, just not a worldwide thing. But it caused a really big stagnation on the Western Front. So in the Western Front, it was more about building a trench line, and the Germans building trench line, the French building trench line. They sent troops in the no man's land. So trench, and there's no man's land because no one can survive in there because of the barbed wires or machine guns and all the poison gases in there. So, and they were keep sending troops over and over again to die in the no man's land. That was like the big stagnation of the Western Front, and that is one of the reasons why the casualty of World War One has such higher numbers compared to the war on the same on a similar scale in the before. And however, because of the how dense the troops are in the same amount of land, in the Eastern Front, it was a bit different. So it was rather about the pitched battle, like not a this stagnation, attrition warfare. It was more of a big, strong one battle thing, like good old days, if you will. And on the Eastern Front, that was like the main thing. On the other hand, in the Western Front, there has been some stagnations, and the reason why the war has been delayed is that. And also, we have to talk about defensive and offensive weapons. So weaponries progress over time. It is as the science does, so does the weapons. So does the weapons. But the one thing different about the World War One is that the defensive weapons has really higher values than the offensive weapons. So in the old days, offensive weapons has a high ground than the defensive weapon because you cannot really uh you know you cannot really defend, yeah. So being offensive is way more, it has more strategical advantage than being defensive. But in this particular era of this history, it is the opposite. The offensive weaponry uh hasn't really been developed compared to the defensive weaponry. So the tactic was that the barbed wire. So barbed wire, we all have seen one. You can just go to your grandfather's farm and you can just find one, yeah. But one thing about this barbed wire thing is that you cannot really go through it, and you have to get all these kind of equipments, or you have to like make a road, yeah, with the equipments or like other thing, and it'll delay your speed like for, I don't know, 5 minutes if you're a really trained soldier. And this trench thing, so instead of standing on the ground and shooting and expect the enemy to miss all of your body, instead of that, you dig the trench, and you sit in there and you shoot at the enemy without you being exposed on the field. So because of this trench and the barbed wire has combined, you can now kill the enemy trying to go through a really big land covered with barbed wire, and you can just hunt down the enemy while they're struggling over there. And the third thing is about the machine guns. So machine guns at the time, they were heavy, and they used water to cool down. So you can't really move and shoot with that thing. So what they did was they would have the stationary machine guns in each part of the trench, and they would just shoot and shoot and shoot. And because of this overlapping fields of fire, and in there there is a barbed wire, and in the trench your troops are being safe and like that, and the enemies are coming over. So when the enemies come over, they have to go through the barbed wire while being attacked by machine guns. And after you go into your trench, there are the second and third and fourth trenches backing up the first trench. So defensive side has way more strategical and tactical advantage than the offensive at this particular era of the time. So that is the reason why the trench warfare was a big of a thing to mention in this particular era of the history. And the field guns were good. They have made some progresses and things like that, but there hasn't. So the trench kind of covers you, and that includes artillery shells. So unless you're bringing like a big artillery, you're not really gonna hit or severely, sorry, severely damage the enemy trench. But what they do is that they would make the lands really hard to go through. And also, it is like when you get hit by artillery shell, you die. Like that's just the thing, you die. So you cannot really just go straight into onto the lands at so that was the main thing about the field guns. And so because of this trench warfare and the stagnation at the Western Front, the whole warfare has gone into attrition warfare, where you spend lots of time and resources on the war. So that's not what Germany really wanted at the time. They really wanted a really big tactical victory that will change the tide of the war. I mean, it is like a Prussian thing it is like a Prussian thing. So they just, they just needed one victory to win everything. That's like the German. That is like a German, no, Prussian military officer thing. But they didn't really have that at this time of the era. I mean, they really wanted it, but they could not achieve it because of the stagnation. And because and the Ottoman joins. So wait a minute. So the Ottomans, they had this power before, but at this particular time era of the time, they were losing powers. So what they really needed was uh naval ship. And I mean that's what they thought at least. So what they did was they bought HMS Agincourt from the UK. So it was supposed to go to Brazil, Brazilian Empire at the time, and it was called Rio de Janeiro class battleship, but the Ottomans wanted it, so the Ottomans took it. But because Ottomans were allied with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the German Empire, the British government thought they might use the HMS Agincourt, or they might give it to the Germany. So Mr. Winston Churchill, he was he was the minister of navy at the time, so he kind of took it, like without paying the proper robbing, should I say, or maybe it is like more of a London thing, taking things without consent, but they did it. And because of that, the Ottomans hated the British guts, to their guts. And the public opinion of the Ottoman Empire has really gone down has gone down to anti-British at the time. And here comes the Moltke class battle cruiser. So because of that, the Germany kind of gave their naval ship to the Ottoman Empire, and the public opinion has gone to Germanic, but it was a rubber stamp. So what they did was that they would send all of their troops, the Germans, they have embarked all the crews in the ships and all the things necessary for the warfare, and they transferred into Ottoman Empire Navy, and they attacked Sevastopol. So it was not done by Ottoman Empire. Technically, it was done by Germans, but it was technically done by Ottoman Empire because it had the Ottoman flag on there. So, and the Russians, Sevastopol is a Russian city. So at the time, so the Russians didn't really like it. So they were quite forced to join the war on the November. And here comes the stagnation. So, as I have explained before, the in the World War One, of offensive side has way more disadvantages than the defensive side. So, uh, there has been some big stagnation. So, and there has been uh this German strategy called unrestricted submarine warfare. So what they thought was that the Americans were helping the UK and the British and the French, and they thought the Germans thought that is not fair. I mean, of course, the Americans said, if you have the money and if you have the boats, then you can just come here, buy our things, and take it back to your home country. But the British Navy at the time were the strongest navy in the world. So the Germans really the Germans were not really able to do that. So instead, they thought, why don't we just sink down the ships going to the UK, like anything? So they kind of used their submarine and they sunk everything. They thought it was the American ship. And there is a campaign of Dardanelles. So it is a naval warfare, and it is worth to write a book about this campaign, but it'll be really long book, and I wouldn't really necessarily board, yeah. So it is just one of it is I'll just say that it is a part of the stagnation and this Gallipoli campaign. So it is a city in Turkey, and so Winston Churchill kind of screwed everything up in the Gallipoli, trying to land in there, and instead of landing the troops in there, he lost like around 100,000 troops and two battleships in there. So uh, really big loss for the UK. And so Italians kind of betrayed. So on the first part of the war, the Italians were allied with the Austro-Hungarian and the German Empire, but they betrayed because the Austro-Hungarian Empire promised them for Dalmatia and other lands, but they didn't really get that. So the Italians declared their own war, declared the war, and here goes your Italian front. So it was mostly fought on the upper part of the Italy. And I have been to one of their museums at the time. It was quite good. It is in the middle of the mountains, literally, and it used to be a fortress, and that were used in both world wars. So it was beautiful to see that. It it was in the middle of the mountain and it was near the sunset. So and this I am not I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I'm pretty sure it is Görlitz Tarnov offensive or something. And this was a Russian offensive, and it was really successful offensive because they had to go through they were able to eliminate lots of enemy forces, but it was not successful enough. So it kind of elongated this stagnation. And the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of Somme. So this is like a main like two main events in the Western Front. And if I have to pick like three one of the most three severe battles in there, then I would say the Verdun and the Somme without any hesitation because of the 2 million casualties in there. And but the Battle of Jutland, so it is a naval warfare again, and some people say it is like a fight between axe with hammer. So it was a battle between the UK Navy and the German Navy, and they had a fight. They all kind of sunk down because of the this battle cruiser idea of having a battle cruiser. So it is really long naval story, so I wouldn't necessarily mention this one, but it is just part of the stagnation. I think I might do another video on this Battle of Jutland because it is so interesting. So the Battle of Verdun, the German offensive was really tremendous. So they had to take this land called Verdun, and they kind of marched in there. And what the Germans brought was they brought 1,500 field guns, and they brought 300,000 shells they used in there. And their idea was after bombardment of 300,000 shells, they would march over and swiftly conquer the enemy trench. Oh, and fortify it. And the French kind of predicted it. So, and because of this heavy raining, the swiftly conquer and march after bombardment didn't really went well. So the plan has been nullified, and they had go through, and the British counteroffensive has, I mean, the French counteroffensive uh, has been done, and because of this massive forces of people clashing in this small land, and because of the trench warfare, so they all have their advantages when they're being defensive, but when they're trying to do offensives, they have to throw all the way throw all of their advantages. So, but they were quite forced to advance to offense. So result of that is that there has been some massive slaughterhouse opened in the middle of the land, and it was called a grinder or manslaughter house in there, and the casualty was tremendous. 40 430,000 Germans have died. The Germans had 430,000 casualties, and French had 550,000 casualties. This is quite a lot. It is like 1 million casualties on the both side. And right after this Battle of Verdun, the Battle of Somme happened. So it was like a counteroffensive thing. Not right after, but like after the Battle of Verdun. Sorry about the timeline thing. So the British and the French had this unification, and they tried to march, and they tried to mimic the same tactic that the Germans used. So the British brought 1,500 field guns. I mean, copycats, and there has been some problem with that. However, so what they used was a scatter shells, which is a thing. So it explodes in the mid-air, and it spreads the fragments. It is like fragment shells. So it is quite good for killing, having damaging. It is quite good against the soft targets like human on the field, but it is not quite effective against the trenches because it is just, think of it as a nails raining from the sky. I mean, it'll seriously hurt a man, but it didn't really hurt a building or something like that. So what they should have used was the HE shells, which is like high explosive shells, but they didn't that didn't really work on the Battle of Verdun because of the heavy raining, the artillery shells would not detonate. So they didn't really use the HE or the high explosive cells in there. I don't know the real reason behind that, but I'm pretty sure they were just being a copycat and not being creative. So because of this misjudgment of headquarters, British casualty of 53,000 on the first day happened. And for your information, 58,000 US army casualty was happened in the Vietnam War, and this is for all the Vietnam War. Around 16,000 US soldiers died for whole Vietnam War. And on the first day of the Battle of Somme, the British has 53,000 casualty. Madness. So from the July 1st to November 18th, for 5 months, 420,000 British casualties and 200,000 French casualties and 530,000 German casualties because so because of this progression of 6 miles for all the soldiers died, there has been some criticism of the Battle of Somme on the British headquarters. So for 6 miles, they spent 630,000 life troops. They all were a man. They all wore a father, a son, or a husband of someone, and they all just died like a died worse than a pig, unless they had this in the slaughterhouse, unless all the parts of the pigs are used for the being useful, but instead in this slaughterhouse they all tried to kill each other, and they died in the most one of the most painful way possible, like overbleeding or you know all the other nasty reasons. So this is the cruelty of the World War One. One of the most cruel battle, and also one of the battle that shows the most accurate aspect of the World War One. And this so another stagnation. So this Brusilov offensive, it is Russian. And the Russians tried to do other offensive, and the general was Brusilov. So they they tried one last offensive before that, and historians estimate 1 million to 2.4 million casualties happened during this offensive, and as a result, the Austro-Hungarian Empire became a satellite state. Not really a satellite state, but it was more of an assistant of German Empire after that, because they lacked they were quite incompetent because of the various reasons. I could write a book about it if you want, but like there were tons and tons of reasons the Austrian and Hungarian Empire didn't really fought well. But even though Austro-Hungarian Empire was not really good, the Russians still did not achieve any strategic goals, and instead there has been tremendous damage to both people and their treasury. So because of that, they had this October Revolution later on. And to counter the Ottoman Empire, there has been some riots or disputes in the Arabian lands. And of course, the British supported it because why not? Every uh, every problem on the earth, half of them is caused by British. That's what is jokingly said among Korean history nerds. But I think it is quite true because they have supported the House of Saud, which later goes to Saudi Arabia. Sounds familiar, right? And the Britons supported it, and they were quite good at, you know, making a mayhem in the Arab lands. And later on, they are still good at making a mayhem in the Arabian lands. So we'll see about that. And another battle called the Battle of Caporetto. So this is Italian warfare between Austro-Hungarian and Italians. And for some reason, the Italians lost. They started the offensive and they lost. And they lost some bit of their land for some reason. We all don't know about that. And there's another. So because of this whole stagnation and thing, the German HQ tried to achieve any meaningful strategic goal, and they all failed. I mean, some of them succeeded, but not in a successful enough way. So and in the other hand, there has been meaningless spending of troops or resources, if you will. So everything didn't really went well for the Germans or the French. And the Americans joined. So as I have previously mentioned on this wait a minute, where is it? Yeah, unrestricted submarine warfare. So as I have mentioned before, the unrestricted submarine warfare was a thing that they would sink down every ship that is going from America, because they thought it was the British ship, not the American. But here goes Lusitania, which is a American ship, and it sunk because of the German naval attack. And the Americans didn't really like it because you didn't really like your ship being sunk by another country. And there has been some terror assaults all around the America that is anti-Germanic, and the public opinion has turned into anti-Germanic. And on this particular time, a certain event called the Zimmerman telegram happened. So what it really was is that Mr. Zimmerman, who is a minister of diplomacy in German Empire, he sent a telegram to Mexico to attack America, and it's for some reason, and the Britons got the information first than the America, and they kind of sent it to America. So, and the anti-Germanic public opinion has got even worse. So later on, the America participates into the war. And the Russian had the revolution. So due to the failure of Brusilov offensive and in the other offensives, there has been big economic crisis, and Russian economy is not always good. I mean, it is always not good, but it has got even worse. And at the time, it was really harsh winter. Some scientists estimate that there has been some major climate disaster at the time of the era. And as I have previously mentioned before, the Emperor Nikolai the Second was quite incompetent man, and he tried to suppress the riot, and the movement of suppressing the riot itself has brought up the rise of the worker unions. So and the bureaucrats were really corrupt. I think it is kind of a Russian traditional thing or something like that. But because of the corrupt bureaucrats, there is an event called the Battleship Potemkin, or if you read it in a Russian way, it's gonna be Potemkin, but because it has to be E and Yo, not E, or things like that. But the main thing about this battleship is that this weird name battleship is that the crews inside the battleship was not fed enough, and their 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 meal included maggots because of the bureaucrats smuggling and badgering the money. So there has been really big uprising there, and because of this battleship Potemkin event, the February Revolution have been made, and Nikolai the Second has been dethroned, and the Republic of Russia has been brought. And 8 months later, there is something called October Revolution, and that's where you get the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR. And because of this thing, they kind of quit on the war because they really have to focus on the what's inside the country, not what's outside the country. So the central power has surrendered. So because the Baghdad has been conquered by the British and Arabian forces, and the Ottomans were quite down on the war. And this Battle of Passchendaele, I'm not perfect at French, so please understand my French pronunciation. This Battle of Passchendaele has has been really successful to defeat Germany, and there has been some economic crisis after Germany. So some people think it is Germans being too focused on the war, and therefore the economic crisis happened. But instead, it is that the German bureaucracy was uh, so effective. They put all of their resources in the most effective way possible, and they used every last bit of their resources. And because you used all of your resources, there has been big economic crisis under Germany. And this Treaty of Brest-Litovsk is that a treaty that the Russians and the Germans took. So the treaty was about Russia not participating in the war anymore. And before and after that, the Germans had one last offensive that it was like using the last resource of the Germany, and they launched something called the Ludendorff offensive, and it failed. It failed royally. And the American Expedition Army has arrived into European continent, and this just around 1 million of them. And because they were well fed and they were not well trained, but they're the numbers are powers. So the Hindenburg line, that was which was the defensive line of the Germany, has been fallen due to this 100 days offensive. So it was not called at the time at this at as 100 days offensive at the time, but that's what the historians call it. And because of all of these events, there has been mutiny in the Kiel. it was a big naval port, and and there has been some mutinies in there, and because of that, the Germans surrendered. So at the end of the war, the Italians gained Trieste, but they did not gain the Dalmatia. So not bad, but not good for them. And the UK has gained tremendous amount of war reparations and colonies from the Germans, and the Japan has gained some experiences from the UK, and they also gained some interests in the colonies. Uh, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, the Russians, and the Ottoman Empire has been dismantled, and France has gained Alsace-Lorraine, which is a land that has way more value. So the reason why Alsace-Lorraine was so important at the time was that and it still is important because it is so industrialized, and around four-fifths of French steels came from there because they have like really tons and tons of iron mines in there. So which has been really important for both Germany and the French. So and the French has gained due to this war. So the effects of the yeah uh so today we will end with this end of the war, and from the next video I will deal with the effects of the World War I and some trivias and aftermath. Thank you.